Okay, welcome back. Next up on the live stage, we have the road ahead for car sales with some brilliant car manufacturer bosses. We're going to be joined by Andy Barrett. He's the Chairman and Managing Director of Ford of Britain. Lance Bradley is the Managing Director of Mitsubishi Motors UK. Simon Hetherington is the Commercial Director of Kia. And Jeremy Thompson is the Managing Director of Mazda Motors. Please welcome our guests to the stage.
Hello.
Hello.
Nice to have you back again. So, as with our other sessions, if you have any questions that you want to ask our panelists, just raise your hand. We have Simon over here. Wave, Simon. And Nigel over there, and maybe some other people, ready to take your questions. But I'm going to get straight in and say, Andy, where do you think the market is going to end up by the end of the year in terms of sales?
I think the market is best described as interesting. Obviously, a record March surprised a lot of people's expectations. That was followed by a very difficult and challenging April, certainly from a new car point of view. Easily described, or as I did to my own boss, as it was the March hangover and Easter, but I can't quite explain May. So it's a little bit of a challenge. There's plenty of excuses. We've just got to work harder as an industry to engage customers. That means better value, better processes, more professionalism, and absolutely knuckle down and do the job properly.
Would you be prepared to put a number on what you think will help?
We were looking as a car and commercial vehicle market around 2.8, 2.9 million. I think arguably we have to revise that down probably to about 2.65, 2.7 million. But one has to recognize that's still almost a record market in the UK, and we've got to remind ourselves that in the new car business, these are the heydays. There are, as we know, cycles to this market, and the depths are pretty difficult, but this is almost a record market, so we just recognize that and make the most of it.
Lance, what do you think?
I agree with what Andy's saying, really. It's the market, the car market is challenging from our own point of view. The pickup market is up as much as the car market's down, so that helps us. It's I think one other factor with April is that there was pull forward into March because of the change in the road tax, and maybe we're still seeing a little bit of that. But it's I would say most of us were surprised that the car market was down 20% or so in April, but we would expect to see a recovery during the rest of the year, and as Andy said, still a very strong market.
That's good. Simon, what do you think?
Yeah, risk of just saying I agree with these guys. I would echo again that it will be one of the strongest markets in history in any of our times. So it's not a terrible situation, and year to date we're still up on last year, or to the end of April still up on last year. So we shouldn't lose sight of how strong quarter one was, albeit recognising that quarter two's played pretty differently.
Jeremy, anything you'd like to add?
It's going to be very dull, but it's
be controversial. Come on.
Yeah, we share. Well, we'll be in a second. We share a similar view in terms of the market this year, but for that to happen, it's going to be soft for the rest of the months to come. After a stellar March and then a very weak April, May's looking a bit patchy, particularly on retail footfall. I think what's interesting is when you look next steps to 2018, the spread on manufacturer views is huge. It's, there's 400,000 units difference between the highest and the lowest in terms of manufacturer perspectives on 2018, and that's a big spread.
We've had a number of panels today. We've had franchise dealers, and our readers tell us it as well. They say that manufacturers' demands are getting more onerous all the time and are impacting their business. What would you say to dealers that think your targets are unrealistic? And I'm not picking on anybody, but I'm going to say Jeremy first.
Well, we set our targets deliberately lower this year, anticipating the market, and make no secret that in this particular month we've also been very responsive already and taken targets down further. I think it's unrealistic to set targets that are unachievable, because ultimately the consequences are very bad for both the networks and for manufacturers, and has a long hangover. appreciated we have huge constraints and problems in terms of supply and feeding that supply. It takes many months. But in this kind of unstable market with the kind of retail uncertainty, I think manufacturers owe a debt to their retailers to work very closely, in close step.
Simon, what are your thoughts?
I risk of lots of saying I agree. 99% of our dealers achieved or exceeded their targets during the first quarter. On that basis, you've got to say maybe the targets were too low.
Lance, what about yourself?
I'm just curious as to whether many of your dealers felt that it was because the targets were too low, or probably not. It's what the other guys are saying. It's always a challenge as a manufacturer to set targets. They have to be stretching enough to achieve what we need to achieve, and we've all got targets too. But at a point where dealers feel that they can not only hit the target but make some money from hitting the target, and that's the balance that we continually have. It's one of the key things that we as manufacturers do, and that's the same now as it's always been.
Andy?
I think the day a dealer tells you that the target's reasonable, you've obviously set it too low. And inherently, it's in the dealer's DNA that everything is a negotiation. That's the business they're in. We are duty-bound as manufacturers with long lead times to set a reasonable forecast for the market and therefore the production requirements, because we too have a return for our own shareholders. But in that process, by encouraging, sometimes pushing, sometimes working, hand in hand with the dealers, and we do treat them as partners, you do help a dealer attain a level that they didn't expect, because they don't always share the same level of ambition. Their budgets are set more conservatively, and as a responsible manufacturer, if you can do that and you set a joint profit target for the network, then you can get mutually achievable goals. Our dealer network had a record profit last year. I'm sure other dealer networks also had a record profit last year. And that doesn't come from giving them gentle objectives that they breeze through and then stop. They've got to drive the business, because cars out the door equals cars back into the workshop. And in the workshop, they have the biggest margins available. So we have a duty to keep every aspect of the dealer busy. It's not just about the car sales business.
So from that, what do you think that dealers should be focusing on at the moment?
Well, I think, last year you asked me the same question, and I talked about workshop
Don't tell them that.
capacity.
Don't give it away.
And it's interesting. I think there are so many aspects, because without a doubt, the dealer business model is under pressure this year. New car margins are under pressure because the amount of static in the industry that's slowing it up, with uncertainty around Brexit, around the election, etc. Contrary, the used car business has been much stronger this year. So if you look at it across the two channels, then that's been great. But you can never be complacent. You got to work on every single channel and every single department constantly, because the speed the consumer is changing, anyone who doesn't work on it is going to be left behind. And you only have to look around today at the amount of innovation, and I think no one can afford to ignore any of it.
Lance, you've been speaking to your dealers today. What have you been telling them?
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing, really. The market is changing. It's always been changing. It will continue to change. It's not actually up to us to tell customers how they should buy cars. The customer chooses how they want to buy a car, and so it's our job and our dealer network's job to make sure that what we're offering is what the customers want. We're seeing more and more companies going towards offering an online solution, which is something that we'll be doing at some point. One of the things we've been talking about this morning to our dealers is how do they adapt to that? Does that mean that there's no role for a dealer? Of course it doesn't. There is a role for a dealer, but it's different from what it is now. And we've been talking a lot about where do you add value, and that's a really important consideration, because customers don't mind paying for value. So that's where we're encouraging our dealers to look, and making sure that every contact they have with customers is fantastic, whether it's buying a new car or a used car, or particularly importantly, to make sure that we're looking after the service customers. And it's, it's very easy to look at cars that are 3 years old or cars that are still within a 5-year warranty or whatever. But actually the repairs and the profitable work starts to come after that, 5 to 7 years old. So, if new car margins are being squeezed, which they clearly are, where could you replace that? And look at the other alternatives, and servicing is one of the biggest alternatives. So that's what we've been working on it for some time, but that's what we were talking about this morning.
Fantastic. And Simon, what about you?
I think the most important thing is to focus on the customer. That's what we'd all say all of the time, but to make sure that we are understanding and delivering what the customer wants and expects. Unfortunately, representing a manufacturer has a lot of new product coming through, and that's a brilliant opportunity to go out and tell new customers about what we can offer them. But at the same time, looking after our existing customer base and making sure we provide the levels of service that they want and they should expect.
And Jeremy?
I guess heralding everything you said, but I would add customer experience, and I mean, for customer experience rather than customer satisfaction. We've done a lot of work with our network, particularly in London, where we've offered delivery of cars to customers' home addresses. All but 2 of 250 customers wanted it delivered in a showroom environment. They love the theatre of that. And I think sometimes we have a tendency to, particularly in a world of increasing digitisation, online purchasing, to forget the role of people in the transactional process, the value of talking about the brand and what people are buying into and connecting with them. And I think that is such a powerful way of keeping customers and getting advocacy. And yet somehow I just feel in automotive we sometimes let that slip, when in other areas of retail they're dialing it up and customers compare us across sectors. So for me, in addition to what's been said, I think customer experience is a real key in a tricky year.
So what about the war on diesel that we're experiencing at the moment? Is it causing any problems in your businesses, and what are you doing to counter it? Andy?
I think it's the question that most people ask, probably any of us. There is clearly uncertainty, and that can lead to a buyer's strike because they clearly don't know what future legislation is going to be. I think there is going to be a lot of change without saying too much. And as an industry, we're going to work hard, particularly around stage 6 diesel, because it's not the demon that it's been made out to be. And it's pretty clear when talking to kind of Westminster that there's a really difficult job to be done. We've seen some early indications from Leeds City Council, their intentions around their clean air zone, and that precludes diesel in its entirety. So there's some pretty draconian first steps, but there is just so much uncertainty and speculation. It's a great media story at the moment, whichever the side of the coin you're on. I mean, we are particularly sensitive to it, having a significant diesel plant within the M25 and the closest car manufacturing facility to Westminster, so that we're feeling particular sensitivity. But it's very difficult. You cannot take that much of the fleet off the road that quickly, and there's certain sectors like commercial vehicles where you need a different solution. So it's got a long while to run, but it's been a great news story for a while. But my advice is remain calm.
Lance, what about yourself?
Yeah, it's a slightly frustrating one from an industry point of view, because it does make a great story, but the fact is that modern diesels are pretty good engines, and certainly a lot better than diesel engines from 10 years ago. What stories don't tend to pick out, and therefore customers don't pick up, is that difference. And as Andy said, I've had people saying to me, so should I sell my diesel? And that's that's a difficult situation for customers, and it's actually difficult for us as manufacturers, because you don't know what legislation's coming, and you don't know what the future's going to bring. It's the same as anything as a manufacturer. You're trying to plan ahead and look at the most efficient response that you can. And you know that we've done a lot of work with plug-in hybrids and petrol hybrids, and that's proved very popular. And I don't think anybody would argue that the electrification of vehicles is is happening and is on its way. The question is how quickly you can get there with infrastructure and with the cost of that kind of technology. And the important thing is to realize that it's not going to, things are not going to change overnight. It's not going to suddenly become, you shouldn't be driving a diesel. But I do expect, the diesel mix of the sale of the market's been decreasing over the last couple of years. I don't expect to see that continue, probably to be replaced by electric vehicles.
Thank you. Simon?
Yeah, no doubt, short term it is having an impact, and I'm sure all the dealers here would echo that customers are asking more questions about diesel than they have before. And agree with the guys, it's a bit frustrating how much of the reporting is not very accurate in respect of modern diesels and tends to group things together in a way that we'd prefer to see a bit more clarity on that. I think as well government policy can really help us here, and it's a bit confusing at the moment between the different bits of legislation on CO2 and on air quality, and greater clarity and certainty would be really helpful for all of us. But pick up Lance's point as well, I think the good opportunity in this is to promote the emerging alternative powertrains which are increasingly available, and maybe that is the positive to come out of this. It gives us better opportunities to talk about those.
And Jeremy, are you worried about this war on diesels?
Yeah, I think we talked about demonisation of diesel. I think it's a really big issue. There's a lot of dealer stock, a lot of customers own diesels. The ramifications for demonising it are very significant to the industry. If we look at London, where probably there's the biggest centre of concern about it, and understandably from a health point of view, half of all NOx is coming from diesel gas central heating of homes and offices. We don't really talk about that or put it into context. Of all the rest, the 50% that comes from road transport, only 11% comes from cars. So I think getting it into context, communicating it in simple sound bites, through media, which don't necessarily want to have a more detailed explanation, is a challenge. And I think that's going to take some focus. The SMMT have done a great job of setting that up. I think we just need to land the messages better. And it's a responsibility, I think, certainly for those of us on the manufacturing side, to give the networks the right kind of collateral to share that message with customers, who are, particularly in urban areas, undeniably quite concerned about what's happening. Perhaps less so in rural at the moment.
Okay, shall we see if there's any questions in the audience for our panel here? Anybody want to put their hand up? No? Becca?
So how have the new tax rules been affecting your dealers? Have you felt any... you can tell I'm getting tired now and I'm losing my train of thought. Your cars, are they going to be hit by the new tax rules? Are you going to feel any pinch? Shall we start with Jeremy this time?
If you're talking about the VED ruling, then
Yeah.
I think there was a pull forward and then there was a dip, and we sail on. I think it's a small bump in the road, and consumers who are walking into showrooms today aren't rejecting new car purchase because of it. So I think it was a relatively temporary effect. There are probably far bigger concerns for consumers, than the few £100 variation that may have happened there, which is hidden amongst everything else, today. So I think it was an interesting media story for a while. Probably we used it to our advantage to hit March, and we've suffered the pain in April.
But will you feel any pain over cars costing more than £40,000? Do you think that people are spending that much care?
We don't make one.
Do you not? Oh, you're saying...
Cheap as chips.
Good news. Simon?
Yeah, we don't have a lot of our range at that price, but we haven't seen any significant impact in demand. So I think, as Jeremy said, the impact was between March and April, and we've all been through that and weathered that storm, but now it's about getting on with business as normal. That's the new rules we now operate under.
I think the biggest thing and the biggest issue from our point of view is that there doesn't seem to be a great deal of joined up thinking in terms of what signals the government's sending on taxation. They're making a big deal about promoting air quality and encouraging the switch towards electric vehicles, and yet for a used car, a one-year-old used car, the road tax on a Outlander plug-in hybrid is the same as it is on the biggest Range Rover. And I don't think that's the right signal to be sending. So in terms of customer behaviour, we do sell a few cars above £40,000, and we've not really seen, if you've got £40,000 to spend on a car, a bit more road tax isn't really going to influence your decision. But I do think it's important to get a joined up policy from the government on what signals they want to send on low emissions vehicles, because what's coming out of OLEV at the moment is different from what's coming out of the Treasury with road tax.
I think this was a great piece of revenue-raising taxation, because obviously the amount of zero-rated vehicles on the road was increasing, so a great way of leveling that back. But when you look at how most consumers purchase a new vehicle, it's a monthly payment. It's a monthly payment for 2 or 3 years, and they just roll into the next one. So those payments go up or down, and to spread the VED change across a monthly payment, it's cushioned. So yeah, it did create a record March, there is no doubt about that. There has been a corresponding dip, and if you take the two an average, then it's probably more like a typical couple of months. But I don't think on that monthly payment basis it's going to deter people, or the poor old manufacturer will spend more marketing money to equalize the payment and absorb it. So it's a revenue transfer from the manufacturer to the revenue. We only have one vehicle really over £40,000, and that's Mustang. And you either want one or you don't.
So just lastly, we've only got a couple of minutes left, and it's going to be quite a big topic, but can you sum up what you're hoping for out of a Brexit deal in a very succinct fashion, please?
You've got about 20 seconds each.
Andy.
Well, Brexit in Ford is much debated. One, you know, everything we make here, we export. Everything we sell here, we import. So we're going to get hit every way. And if you take an engine that we build here, often the components are imported, so they may pick up a tariff. They enter into an engine, which is exported on another tariff, and then re-imported in a vehicle, so it gets it again. So we desperately want barrier-free, tariff-free trade, as probably our partners around Europe do, because they're so reliant on the British market to consume their vehicles. If there is, tariffs, we need that customs point to be as minimal, because any frictional loss there in terms of days or disruption to trade or production is critical. And if you think about it, the consumer who needs a part for their car and is coming in from the continent, we have a duty of care as manufacturers and dealers alike to keep our customers moving, and that's a considerable drain. So we need certainly barrier-free trade as a minimum. We would like the ability to move workforce around, and we really need predictability. But all of that is on the table. It will be debated forever. I think there will be so many opinions, and in 2 years' time we'll know.
Lance, what are you hoping for from the Brexit deal?
Stability and predictability is obviously important. From our own point of view as a Japanese manufacturer, we don't currently manufacture in the UK. But if there were to be a trade deal with Japan that came out of it that removed the current 10% import tax, that would obviously be a good thing. And with the government saying that they're going to be looking for more deals around the world, then that's something that we would be very happy to see.
Simon?
Yeah, to use the jargon of the day, a strong and stable economy, because we want consumers to continue buying and to continue coming to our showrooms. And to echo the other comments, remove the resolution of tariffs. That's going to cause the greatest issue if that's not resolved.
Jeremy?
Well, I guess like Mitsubishi, 100% of everything we bring into the UK comes from predominantly Japan, also from Thailand. So we pay tens and tens of millions of pounds in trade tariffs to the European Union, always have done, and it's embedded in our business model. It will be interesting to see what happens if there is a level playing field. I think that, coupled with any potential changes in terms of the relationship that UK has with Europe, is going to perhaps change things over the coming years, perhaps not. So at worst, my expectations are we're in a very benign position. It can't get any worse than it is today. And at best, we could have a positive advantage.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Next up, we'll be back in a few moments' time discussing the future of digital dealerships with experts from our headline sponsors G-Forces, CarWow, Code Weavers and CAP HPI. We'll be back in a few moments, but please, for now, thank my panel very much indeed. Thank you.